Title: The Weight of Quiet Love. Aisha learned the sound of loneliness long before she learned how to name it. It was the soft echo of her own footsteps on the cracked cement stairs of the apartment building, the hum of a flickering bulb that never quite stayed on, the silence that followed when she whispered her worries into the dark and no one answered. Loneliness had a smell, too, cheap detergent mixed with cold rice, and a weight that settled on her chest each night as she lay awake, listening to her son breathe. She was 27 when her husband died, but grief aged her quickly. By the time she turned 28, strangers spoke to her with the careful politeness reserved for women who had seen too much. She did not correct them. She had. Her son, Zain, was only 3 when his father was lowered into the ground. Too young to understand death, too young to know why his mother cried silently into pillows and stared at the door as if someone might still walk through it. Zain only knew that his father no longer lifted him onto his shoulders, no longer laughed loudly in the evenings, no longer came home smelling of dust and sweat and comfort. Aisha remembered that day with painful clarity. The heat, the prayers, the way the world seemed to tilt when the earth hit the coffin. She remembered gripping Zain so tightly that he whimpered, and then hating herself for hurting the one person she was trying to protect. From that day on, life became a series of small survivals. She moved into a single-room apartment on the edge of the city, a place where the walls were thin and the future felt thinner. The landlord didn't ask many questions, and Aisha was grateful. She didn't want to explain why she couldn't afford a better place, why her hands shook when she counted money, why she flinched whenever someone mentioned husband. She worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices in the early morning and sewing clothes at a small tailoring shop in the afternoon. By the time she returned home at night, her feet burned and her back screamed, but she still knelt beside Zain's thin mattress to help him with his homework, still brushed his hair gently, still told him stories about brave boys and kind mothers who always found a way. Sometimes, when Zain fell asleep mid-sentence, his small hand clutching her sleeve, Aisha would sit there for a long time, afraid that if she moved, the moment would break. Those were the only times she allowed herself to cry. She cried quietly, always quietly. The world was not kind to single mothers. Neighbors whispered, shopkeepers watched her closely, relatives offered advice that felt more like judgment. "You should remarry," they said. "A child needs a father." They never asked what she needed. They never saw how hard she tried to be enough for 2 people. Aisha tried not to let their words settle inside her, but some nights they did. On those nights, she stared at the ceiling and wondered if love alone could truly raise a child. She wondered if Zain would one day look at her and see only what she lacked. Money was the sharpest worry. There were months when she skipped meals so Zain could eat properly. Months when she patched his shoes with thread that didn't quite match. Months when she prayed that he wouldn't get sick, because sickness meant medicine, and medicine meant choosing between health and rent. Once, during a particularly hard winter, Zain developed a fever that wouldn't break. Aisha carried him to the clinic wrapped in her own shawl, her arms aching, her heart pounding with fear. The doctor prescribed medicine that cost more than she had in her purse. She stood at the pharmacy counter, her hands trembling as she counted coins again and again, hoping they would somehow multiply. They didn't. "I'll come back," she whispered, ashamed. "Please hold it for me." She walked home with Zane burning against her chest and sobbed behind a locked door, pressing her face into the wall so her neighbors wouldn't hear. That night, she prayed harder than she ever had in her life, not for wealth, not for comfort, but for mercy. Zane survived. Somehow, they always did. As Zane grew older, he began to notice things. "Why don't we have a car like my friends?" he asked once, not accusing, just curious. Aisha smiled, though her heart tightened. "Because we have strong legs," she said lightly. "They take us everywhere we need to go." "Why don't you ever buy new clothes?" he asked another time. "Because I already have everything I need," she replied, smoothing the fabric of her worn dress. He accepted her answers, but she saw the questions forming behind his eyes. Children were observant like that. They noticed the pauses, the tired smiles, the way their mother's shoulders slumped when they thought no one was watching. On Zane's 10th birthday, Aisha saved for months to buy him a small cake and a second-hand football. She wrapped it carefully, her fingers aching from long hours at the sewing machine. When Zane opened it, his face lit up like the sun had chosen him. "This is the best birthday ever," he declared. Aisha turned away quickly, afraid he would see the tears. She didn't cry because she was sad that day. She cried because love sometimes hurt more than hunger. Years passed. Zane grew tall and quiet, with his father's eyes and Aisha's sense of responsibility. He learned early not to ask for much. He helped with chores without being told, studied under dim lights, and walked home with his mother every evening, matching his steps to hers. At school, other children teased him. "No father," they said. "Poor." Once, a boy shoved him during recess and laughed. Zane came home that day with a split lip and silent rage burning behind his eyes. Aisha cleaned his wound with shaking hands, her heart breaking in ways words could not touch. "Why didn't you tell the teacher?" she asked softly. "They said it was nothing," he muttered. That night, Aisha sat alone after Zane slept and wondered if the world would ever stop testing them. She wondered how many scars her son would have to carry because of circumstances he never chose. When Zane turned 16, Aisha collapsed at work. Years of exhaustion, poor nutrition, and untreated pain finally caught up to her. She woke in a hospital bed with harsh lights above her and fear crawling up her spine. Her first thought was not of herself. "Zane," she croaked, "where is my son?" He was there moments later, standing at the foot of her bed, eyes wide with terror he tried desperately to hide. "I'm here, Mama," he said, his voice cracking. For the first time, Aisha saw herself reflected in her child's fear. She saw how fragile she had always been, how much her strength had cost him. The doctor warned her. "You need rest," he said firmly. "If you keep pushing like this, your body will give up." Rest was a luxury Aisha had never owned, but she tried. Zane took on a part-time job after school despite her protests. "We're a team," he told her. "You always said families help each other." She wanted to argue, to protect him from adulthood for as long as possible, but the truth settled heavy between them. He was already grown in ways children should never have to be. Aisha's health slowly declined. Some days she couldn't get out of bed. Some days her hands shook too badly to sew. Medical bills piled up like silent threats. Through it all, Zane stayed, cooking simple meals, studying late into the night, pretending not to notice how thin his mother had become. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the window, Aisha called Zane to her side. "Sit with me," she said. He did. She traced his face with trembling fingers, memorizing every line, every expression. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" he asked, confused. "For the life I gave you," she said, tears sliding down her temples. "For the things I couldn't give. For the times you were hungry. For every dream I couldn't afford." Zane's eyes filled instantly. "Mama, don't," he said, his voice breaking. "You gave me everything." She smiled weakly. "I wish love paid the bills." "Love kept me alive," he replied. "Love taught me how to be strong. Love taught me how to care." Aisha turned her face away, overcome. That night, she dreamed of peace. She did not wake the next morning. Zane found her lying still, her face calm for the first time in years. He stood frozen in the doorway, the weight of the world crashing down on him all at once. He was no longer someone's child. He was alone. At the funeral, people spoke of Aisha's kindness, her sacrifices, her quiet strength. Zane listened in silence, holding himself together through sheer will. When the prayers ended and the crowd dispersed, he remained by her grave long after the sun dipped below the horizon. "I'll make you proud," he whispered into the earth. "I promise." Years later, Zane stood in a courtroom, a scholarship letter folded carefully in his pocket. He had studied law, not for money, but for justice, for women like his mother, for children like the boy he once was. He never forgot her sacrifices. Every success carried her name. Every step forward was built on the love she gave without ever asking for anything in return. And sometimes, late at night, when the world grew quiet, Zane swore he could still hear her voice, soft, tired, full of love, telling him the same story she always did. Brave boys grow up, kind hearts survive, and love, even when it is heavy, is never wasted.